Wait, boy. If I didn't get to eat this roti today, I would have sure cried. Cry, boy. I's a big man, though. Men supposed to cry? I wonder if it's safe to cry in front of my woman. What woman really looking for these days in a man? Are most women happily married or just happy to be married? Talk Heavy Podcast premieres Wednesday, 2nd March on Mended Studios.
Also,
Welcome, everyone. Wherever you are viewing right now, wherever you're hearing the sound of my voice, wherever you are seeing me right now, I want to welcome you to the premiere, our first episode. This is episode 1, right here on Mended Studios. All right, we speak live. This is the Talk Heavy Podcast, all right, where the vibes is light, but the talk is heavy. Yes. You know what I'm saying? So we in for an interesting show. We're going to have an interesting conversation. Definitely something that that needs to be discussed. Well, a lot of people need to be talking about. So we have taken the initiative to talk about it right here on Talk Heavy Podcast. All right. I've got some interesting guests, some very well-spoken people with me. We chilling and we're going to be talking about our topic right now. I want to start off with one of my sisters, right? I consider this young lady family. This is Mrs. Terry-Ann Bosen. It's French, so you gotta pronounce that name properly. All right, Terry, how you going? What's up?
Hey, Jazreel, good evening. Good evening, Trinidad and Tobago. Good evening, world. The vibe's nice, but the talk gonna be heavy.
Yeah. This is how we're gonna be doing it on the Talk Heavy Podcast. We wanna create that culture, and I've got a brother from a different part of the world, right? This guy is like a scholar. Now, when you hear this guy talk, when you hear him speak, you're going to understand why I say he is a scholar, right? Coming all the way from South Africa, one of my good friends I met on Clubhouse. Shout out to the Black Brotherhood, one of the co-founders. This is Huey the Goat. What's going on, brother?
Hey, how are you doing? Pressure's on.
Yeah, it's on. So let me jump right into it, right? Let's waste no time.
Let's jump in.
The topic we're going to be discussing today, crying and showing emotion openly as a man is dangerous. Right? We're making that statement. But we want to hear what are your thoughts. We want to have that discussion this evening. Please feel free. We want to encourage you to like, to share, build the algorithm. I want to say shout out to our viewers as well on YouTube. We are streaming live on YouTube. This is the first time, right, producer? Yeah. That we're going live on the Talk Heavy Podcast YouTube channel. All right, we're here at Mended Studios. All right, it's currently it's culturally, that is, understood for quite some time that men are typically seen as the rock in society, starting from the home, that is. He has the responsibility to hold frame and support the household, either never showing emotion or showing very little. We've been deemed to be first instinct, right? We've been deemed to be first instinct, solution oriented rather than dwelling on emotions. However, in recent times, right, with modern ideology, right, this has been deemed to be counterproductive. A lot of people sometimes refer to it as toxic masculinity, right? Not showing emotion, right? Now, I wanted to have this discussion with these two individuals this evening because Terry, she is on the end from a woman's perspective. You know that men, you would want to see men show emotion,
yeah, definitely,
and whatnot.
Definitely.
But I've had the conversation with Huey on Clubhouse, and his perspective is definitely very unorthodox. Huey is like no emotion, right? No emotions. But let's jump into it. Terry, what are your views on this in particular?
Yeah. Emotions, men showing emotions, dangerous. Dangerous is the word that stood out to me. Dangerous is the word that stood out to me, and I feel like if we agree with that, that's gonna take us down a dangerous road. I feel like that men want to be comfortable showing their emotions. I really feel that. I feel it shows empathy. It causes the women in their lives, and I'm speaking from a woman's perspective.
Right.
It allows the women in their lives, when they see your men, your dads, your brothers, your husbands, your friends showing emotion, you feel like they could empathize with you. They could connect with you as a woman. So I would say definitely not dangerous. I would say encouraged, in terms of building relationship and building trust and being able to connect. So I think emotions are good. And our men should show emotions.
So I've watched a lot of content on social media and whatnot, even spoken to a lot of female friends, and the common thing that a lot of them tend to gravitate towards is that I don't really want a man. I don't like to see men cry. A man crying makes me feel kind of
uncomfortable.
Sometimes some of them, they actually say if my man crying too much, that's a red flag.
Right.
You can't be more emotional than me. You understand?
Well, I get you there. In terms of I think too much is the operative term. You had to find a balance, right? I too don't think you want a man who is constantly in tears. That's something you had to check.
Right.
However, I feel like we could veer on the side of don't cry at all. And I think culture has done that to us, has done that to our men. When you bottle up those emotions, there's a reason we have those emotions. And I feel like tonight we'll talk a little bit about nurture and nature and how that shapes you, how it shapes your personality, But when you're crying is an outlet. Right. Crying is an outlet. So I think, I haven't looked at the science, I haven't looked at the research per se, but I think some of the issues we have in the world is because men don't have that outlet. There's a reason. So if men shouldn't cry, why they have tears though? Kiwi?
All right. I like what you mentioned there. The difference between nature and nurture. I want to come back to that, right?
Yeah, we'll come back to that.
Huey, so let me hear your perspective on this.
I think for the most part you'll be pleasantly surprised the degree to which I agree with what's, I guess, been said so far.
Nice.
I think for sure it's good for men to be in touch with their emotions. When I say that men shouldn't cry, I'm speaking to sort of more of a philosophical understanding of why men are crying in the first place. And I guess that's how I approach the conversation. I think I generally agree with Justice's title, the sentiments of the room, that it can be dangerous to be vulnerable.
Right.
That's by definition what it really truly means to be vulnerable in the first place. You're exposed, right? And you don't know what's going to happen when you're exposed, right? Children are vulnerable and they are exposed to all the dangers of the entire world. And so for sure, being exposed and vulnerable poses a lot of dangers. Now, if you're with, if your partner doesn't handle that delicately, I think that could lead to a lot of chaos. But generally, the reason I say that men shouldn't cry is because I think that men should learn better coping mechanisms outside of crying, right? Wow. So there are lots of good reasons why we do cry. Crying soothes us. It releases all of the the necessary hormones to make us feel better in the moment when we're confronted with stress. So oxytocin and all of these other things. And there's plenty of articles online that suggest the medical benefits of crying as a soothing mechanism. My issue is with the culture today that is forcing or telling men to resort to soothing mechanisms as a way to deal with problems in life. I think that is far more destructive in the long run, and if we're not careful, if it goes unchecked. I think my position comes from sort of an old school way of thinking. I was quite liberal before I arrived at this conclusion anyway, but what really set me off was the other day when I was thinking about why is it that we tell children to stop crying as they get older? So when babies are born, we generally accept them crying for whatever, because that's the only way they know how to communicate. They cry for food. They cry when they need the toilet. They cry when they're hurt. They cry all the time. But as we teach children more sophisticated language, we also start to expect them to cry less, and we almost treat them as if they shouldn't cry for everything. And as they grow older and as we tax on more responsibilities on children, part of those responsibilities we tax on them is the responsibility to communicate outside of crying. I think there's something to be said about that, right? I think when a man finds himself in a position where he needs to cry, in my opinion, I think a lot of things have gone wrong.
Okay.
I think a lot of communication was missed along the way. I think crying is a suboptimal, unsophisticated way to communicate one's emotions and feelings. So ironically, I think that when men are crying, they're doing the thing that women actually don't want them to do, which is not really truly expressing themselves and articulating and contending with their actual feelings in the moment.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's very interesting. You said a lot there.
A lot to unpack.
I think when naturally, do you agree that there's a level of resentment from our female counterparts? Let's say in the dynamic of a relationship. Do you think that there's a certain degree of resentment that comes with a woman seeing her man, the man who's supposed to be the pillar of the home, cry especially for the first time? So she's seeing this for the first time. He's accustomed to being, strong, stoic, solution oriented, right? And it's almost like she spoiled him. He spoiled her. And now she's seeing this for the first time. As unexpected as it is. What do you think about that?
Man, deep down inside, I really want to say that, it doesn't happen as often as we think. But the reality is, between me and my homeboys, we've seen it happen time and time again where that tends to be the case. And, we try and dissect and psychoanalyze what it is. As far as I've thought about it, I always thought about it like this, that in most relationships, there's certain expectations for men to be the stable ones in the relationships, whether that's financially, but certainly mentally as well, and emotionally. The last thing a woman wants to be with is with an emotionally volatile man, because that's the same type of dude who will punch a wall when he's angry, for example, right? So stability is always sort of demanded of men, and when that's not necessarily, and it's one of those things that's implicit. It's not directly communicated within the relationship. It's not as if women go and say, "Hey, I want you to be mentally stable." I think they kind of hope that you're mentally stable as the relationship progresses.
Right. And that's
when that's violated, I think that's where the true resentment comes from. That it almost feels like you're breaking the woman's schema in that moment, where it's like you're violating a contract you didn't know was expected of you, or that either of you signed in that relationship. I think that's where the resentment comes from. I don't necessarily think that women hate men who cry.
I could tell you that they don't.
I think women hate feeling like they were cheated in an agreement of some kind, even if it was an unspoken agreement.
But doesn't that in itself, right? They have an automatic expectation that you be the pillar.
But I want to jump in here. I want to jump in here about the preconceived notions and the expectations. I think in a healthy relationship, there's an expectation for a mutual exchange where a man is supposed to feel safe, even if I'm not able to be the pillar in a particular area, in a particular time, in a particular season, that a helpmeet, that a partner would come alongside and provide that. And I totally agree that there is an expectation in heterosexual relationships where you have male-female, that there is a I would say we weigh heavier on the male, on the man, to bring that stability. But I think it's a dangerous road to go down if we assume that there is resentment if a woman does not get that 100% of the times. That's one-sided. It speaks to weak women. It speaks to spoilt women. And I think, it's a challenge for me to hear that, because in my circle of female friends, I do feel like there's a resentment to men expressing themselves that way. The relationship should be a safe space for the man as much as it's a safe space for the woman.
2 questions, right?
Yeah.
One, do you think that having the expectation, you know, you and your circle of friends, do you think that you're the anomaly? Do you think that the opposite to you is in the vast majority?
That's an interesting question. I mean, I don't want to speak for persons who I'm not connecting with. I get the sense that it might take us back or take us into that nature sort of conversation. Maybe my circle is shaped in a particular way. Maybe I am a part of a circle or a part of a community that thinks in a particular way. But it's very interesting for me to hear, Huey, that you and your boys, that is the perspective. That is the perspective, that there is a resentment if men express themselves this way. And I hope I'm not misquoting you or misunderstanding.
No, it's absolutely the case. And it's not just me and my boys. It's men in general. And I hate to say this, I suppose I should have done this at the beginning of the podcast. I should have introduced what I actually do.
Sure.
I am a copywriter. I work in sort of like the advertising industry. We are, as a copywriter, I'm sort of on the end that's sort of responsible to some degree of creating these narratives and using them to sell products and advertise. Some people say we're unethical pieces of what, and but I see my entire discourse on this topic first starts off with what I do in terms of I look at it from the lens or the frame of media.
Yeah.
Our society is generally okay with the suffering and pain of men and trauma of men, generally speaking. So I'm not necessarily, when I say that, like it happens with my boys and men in general, I'm not saying that sort of resentfully or angry at women. This is the game they've been thrown into, right? I'll give you an example. There's a popular American TV show called The Real, right? It's these it's a panel of minorities.
Very familiar.
Right. I remember watching an episode in which they were talking about a Reddit story where a man had apparently been suspected of cheating on his wife, and his wife's response was to lure him into sort of the bedroom, handcuff him, pretend she was going to play out some sexual fantasy. And then she ends up mutilating him and cutting off his penis.
Wow.
Now, this was a horrific thing to do. However, the response to me was what was disappointing.
Right.
They laughed about it. It's funny. Haha, he got his what chopped off. That's kind of how we react. It wasn't like a memorial or a big publicized event. It wasn't captured on some kind of news story. It wasn't like, there was no public outrage for that particular thing. Had the roles been reversed, though, we know that this would have spoken to other issues concerned with feminism. So part of the thing is there's sort of like a female sisterhood that protects women, but there is no male equivalent. And in fact, an attempt to even form a male equivalent of such a brotherhood that advocates for such issues is going to be met with a lot of pushback, right? It's going to be seen as reinforcing the patriarchy. And so it's like men really don't have many options. We live in a society that's okay with the pain and traumas of men, generally speaking. And it's no wonder why women react like that when men are vulnerable. This is the nature of the game we're in. And I'm not necessarily critical of it, but I tend to look at this and say we need to have a realistic perspective that this tends to be the case across the board culturally, right? We don't really feel bad when men are suffering or when men are in pain. And this is why women expect men to be pillars in the first place. It's not that women are being selfish, or it's not that women are bad people for expecting this. This is the nature of the game. This is in the messaging they see. This is in the messaging we all see. But with that said, I do think that before I sit here and criticize it and denigrate the messaging, before we do that, we should look at how we arrived here as a society and why it is that this is the messaging.
Yeah, I think that's a critical conversation.
Yeah. I like where the conversation is going. As you brought up that the effect social media and TV shows and whatnot have on this narrative. But before we do that, I just had a next question to ask Terry.
Sure.
Aside from the previous one I asked you, I wanted to ask, where do you think that most women they might get this notion that they have an expectation for men to not be emotional or not show them emotions, not cry and whatnot?
Yeah, I think Huey has touched on it in terms of the narrative, the messaging, and that plays into a bigger agenda. And I don't think that's the road we want to go down tonight. But generally, it depends on what you're absorbing from your environment. And I'm going back to the question that you asked me before. Even as I was listening to Huey speak, I will say that I feel like my influences are not necessarily the typical. My influences, my circle, the way I even consume social media is not necessarily the typical. So there might be something to that in terms of how my perspective is shaped. Yeah. But definitely, media has a lot to do with it. Culture has a lot to do with it. Huey is South African, yeah. We are Caribbean, and we know that we grow up with certain expectations. So that's handed down. So I think the conversation goes way beyond our generation. It's something that perhaps we didn't even begin, but it began before us. I think it's a distortion of what nature means for it to be. I do think there is a place, just because of how men are naturally made up, physically made up, mentally made up, that there's nothing wrong with expecting men to be a pillar in a home. That's the way it naturally should be. But there's a distortion of that when roles are reversed, when people want to impart their own agendas, and cultures shift, right, because of those things, because of who's in power, because of what the messaging that they're putting out there. So I think it's a lot of factors in play, but really it's what you allow yourself to be fed with. And of course, we know culture is not always, you're not always aware that you're being cultured in a particular way. Yeah, that happens very unconsciously sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely think that, I agree that nature has a huge part to play in it as well. Because for a great period of time, I always had this notion that naturally women aren't prepared to see men really break down emotionally. You understand what I'm saying? And I also think that, it's safer for us amongst our peers, amongst our tribe.
Okay. Does that come from your nature of being protective as a man, wanting to protect the woman from seeing you being what we might perceive as weak, what you assume might be perceived as weak?
I think, yeah.
Does that come from that place?
I think that's part of the reason. Another part is society generally has an expectation of men, of us, to be a particular way and hold things down, per se. I want to read some of the comments. I got to say good evening to Anthony J. McLeod, one of our teammates. Mel Jones, my sister out there in Tobago. I'm happy to see you. Palm Sergio, blessings to you. Anthony is saying, emotions, yes. The extent of the emotions is in question, though. Right? Good evening, blessings. He's also saying, if the general understanding / perception of crying and emotions are skewed, should we lean more towards reacting based on the current view, or push towards a bit of ideality?
Okay.
That's an interesting question. Shout out to Dylan Boson. Sorry.
Good evening, husband.
Right.
Mr. Boson is in the house.
He's saying big up, enjoying the discussion. I'm happy to have you. Also, shout out to our viewers on YouTube as well, right? Wherever you're viewing from. I want to get into I want to play some clips, right? Our producer has that lined up. Very interesting.
Sure.
The first time I saw these clips, it just confirmed a lot of what I had in my mind concerning this topic in general, right? It's basically what you would be seeing is clips from a show, What Would You Do, hosted by John Quinones, right? It's basically they have actors in our store, right? The sales clerk is an actress, and we have a male actor and a female actress, right? Okay. The female comes in first. She has an issue. She's crying, right? Let me jump into the video and you can see for yourself.
Our hidden cameras are rolling at Mod on Trend in Town and Country, Missouri. Ariane is shopping for a dress.
What do you think of this? It's so beautiful. They're so cute. Yeah.
But when they can't find her size,
We don't have it in small. I checked the other stores and we also are out of it.
panic suddenly sets in.
Oh my God, I don't know what's happening.
Yeah. Try it on before you freak. You never know. It may fit and it may be perfect.
Ariane takes her advice. And now she goes one step further.
Hey, ma'am.
Yeah?
She has another option for you that she thought.
So basically, you see the actress, they don't have a size. She's stressed out. She started crying, right? So the video is kind of chopped up a little bit, just to give some context. So she's crying here, and immediately someone rushes to her aid, right? Let's continue.
Our hidden camera.
What's happening?
Yeah. Try it on before you freak. You never know. It may fit and it may be perfect.
Ariane takes her advice. And now she goes one step further.
Hey, ma'am.
Yeah?
She has another option for you that she thought would look so
thank you
cute
so
on
much.
you.
Thank you.
Well, that was very nice of her, huh? When those options fail, she takes a different approach to help Ariane.
All I do when I get this feeling like that is just like, just take a deep breath. It's gonna be okay.
Yeah.
It's gonna be okay. And you will find something and it's gonna be even better. Just kind of set your mind at.
Let's break it. Who is this?
So we see this all the time. We see this everywhere. Automatically, someone rushes to a woman's aid, right? In the event of any form of distress, whether it be some form of violence domestically or whatever the case is, somebody hit a woman in public. Hey, you can't do that. Call the police one time. You understand? Men go want to fight you, right? Of course, we're not advocating for any form of violence against women.
No, we are not.
We are making this disclaimer, right? Let's jump into the other video one time.
I'm sorry, sir. We don't have this in a small.
That's not gonna work. I really needed that dress.
Immediately, Austin struggles to draw much concern from the other customers.
Man, have you ever had one of those days where just like everything is just like not going your way?
Oh yeah? Is that your day?
Yeah. I was planning on getting a dress for my girlfriend and they don't have it. I know it's
stores here.
I know it's really minor, but it's just like all the things just kind of add together.
Can I help you find another dress?
No, I'm fine.
Okay.
While this next customer doesn't check in on Austin, she does follow up with our actor playing the manager.
Have a nice. Did he say something to you?
He's just acting kind of weird. So I just want to make sure.
Oh, yeah, no, we're fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank
okay,
you.
Yeah.
Why did she approach an employee?
So I think when I saw that part of the video, it really cemented the part of the question that says it's dangerous.
Yeah.
Right. In this instance,
Right.
someone actually thought that the guy was weird. He was.
Yeah.
She saw him as a possible threat. He's just sitting
Yeah.
there. A man is just sitting there. You understand what I'm saying? So what are your thoughts on this thus far, Terry?
I have quite a few thoughts. Both scenarios are hilarious to me, really, because I feel it is, and I want everybody to read me correctly here. I do feel like I am reflecting on being maybe in the minority. I feel it's dysfunctional to cry over a dress, though. Like, for whether you're male or you're female, because I remember one of the persons in the interaction would have said, well, there are other stores, try to walk out. Now I understand that there are times when emotionally you really could be and the guy said it, the male actor, you're having a bad day. I think after kind of trying to figure out, so why is she crying about not getting a dress, or why is he crying about not getting a dress? I think I would kind of try to take a deeper dive, because there must be something more happening. Yeah. And I feel, again, I'm saying maybe I'm in the minority based on the conversation we're having, because I kind of feel like we need to lay aside the issue of the dress and kind of dig deeper for both parties, whether it's male or female. So I'm advocating for that. And I see Huey shaking his head, and I could connect with you there. In terms of we need to be empathetic towards people. As far as I saw, there were two humans who were having some serious crisis that had nothing to do with the dress, right? So maybe I'm in the minority, but yeah. After I think you raised the point of persons kind of saying, okay, is there something happening with this young man who's in the room, just kind of acting weird? And I think that has to do with the disservice that culture, society has done to men, where because some men have been perpetrators of really horrendous things, that automatically we now assume that the male, our male counterparts are all, that is no longer deviant behavior, and every male is capable of it. And I think that is the disservice that society has done to our men. So yeah, that was an interesting clip. Let's hear what you guys think.
Huey?
Yeah, this is probably where I'm probably going to step into a bit of controversial territory here. And I was trying to set up for it gently earlier when I pointed out that I'm not judging how society has come to this conclusion that these are the expectations based on men and these are the expectations based on women. I think not all of them were correct, but I think there are important reasons why we do expect men to be emotionally stable, because the hormonal composition of men and women is different. And so when you add, on average, men have up to 40 times more testosterone than women. Now, it doesn't seem like a big deal, but when you add fluctuating emotions to that and a higher bone density, higher muscle mass in general, and you add testosterone to that equation to a volatile person, you get men who punch walls, you get men who flip things, and the level of physical destruction and violence they can cause in the world immediately in front of them is way higher than women. This is the reality on average. We're not talking about all women. Obviously, there are anomalies out there, but my point is that when a man is emotionally unstable, it has way more potential repercussions for people around him than it does when a woman is emotionally unstable. So from that perspective, there is a practical element to being a little bit more easy to empathize with women. This is the nature of the game, right? This is where the nature element comes in here, right? It does kind of, unfortunately, make a little bit of sense that we are a little bit more empathetic to women because they don't pose as much of a threat to us, even as men, as other men could, right? And oftentimes, when a man is vulnerable, it's so unusual that it begs the question if this is a trap of some kind or if they're luring you into something. It's just unusual behavior. We want, as much as possible in our society, for men's behaviors to be as predictable as possible in order for us to feel safe, right? Particularly women, right? The more predictable men's behaviors are, the safer women can afford to feel, right? But the erratic man is very, very scary for most women and children and other men too. So there's a practical element to this. This was why I said earlier I wasn't judging it. I just wanted us to have a clear understanding on the context and reality of where a lot of these expectations and things came from. With that said, this video demonstrates just that. And it demonstrates what we've been saying for a long time, that we're generally okay with men's pain, with men's trauma, with men's issues. Like, we're generally okay with men having issues. It's up to them to deal with it. I will say, though, that when I have kids, I intend to tell my son he shouldn't cry. I don't intend to tell him that he's not a man if he doesn't. But I also intend to do that with my daughter. But ultimately, it's not really going to be as impactful if I tell my daughter that as it would be if my wife does it, because I can't speak to what the woman's experience is. But I would be consistent across the board. Men and women shouldn't cry, right, as a way of dealing with things, right? The way that woman dealt with that situation, she should have articulated her concerns. She should have troubleshot. She should have tried to resolve it. But that breakdown that she had, it's understandable. We should be empathetic. But I think to some degree, we're living in a culture that enables that time and time again. And I don't know whether that's good for mental health in the long run, to enable that kind of just, to enable people not necessarily taking the responsibility to deal with their emotions. Because when you're crying, you're not actually really dealing with your emotions. You're just expressing them. And I think that's the problem. I'm all for men dealing with their emotions, men communicating, but crying is not the same as dealing with it, right? It's literally an outward expression of those emotions and not much more. It's soothing, it can help.
But can it be part of the process though, Huey? I mean, I feel like it's a legitimate part of the process of dealing with your emotions. There's a place to express, and that might be your first step in dealing. Of course, you don't stop there. But I think it's a challenge for me to accept, and I mean, it's your kids, and of course you can feel free to tell them not to cry if that's your conviction. But I feel like it, and using your same analogy of crying being almost the most basic form, as we're children, and I was really blown away by that analogy. When we're children, when we're babies, we can't express ourselves any other way. But if we think about how we use language in general, you don't throw away the basics because you get advanced, you know? So I believe that crying should be and can be a very valuable part of the process of processing your emotions. I think it's very valuable that you've said you can't just stop there. But I think to say don't cry almost says don't start the process of dealing with your emotions, and that's a concern.
Well, let me clarify. So this is where the language is going to matter.
Yeah.
Saying that men shouldn't cry is not the same as saying that men can't cry.
Right. Because they can't.
And I think that's the problem. And that's what I'm saying. I think that's the problem with how the world treats the messaging of men shouldn't cry. They treat it as if we're saying, if men cry, they are weak, or if men cry, they're not men, or any of that stuff. That's definitely a problem. But that's not the same as saying that men shouldn't cry. And in fact, if I was to play some disingenuous intellectual trickery, right? If I was, I would ask you
with caution.
I would ask you as a hypothetical parent, right? Mm-hmm. Is there any scenario in which you would like for your children to cry? Right? Ideally, in my ideal world, my children would never cry at all. They'd have everything they'd ever wanted, and they'd be happy.
But that's not reality. Yeah. So it's not that you want them to cry, but you understand the value of crying as a valid expression of whatever emotions they're feeling at that time. You know.
So that's probably where we're going to disagree. I don't think crying is necessarily a valid expression. I think it's an expression for sure. Mm-hmm. Like, again, just like punching a wall is an expression.
It is.
Is it the best expression though? Mm-hmm. Are there alternatives? Are you losing something by not seeking out those alternatives? And so when I had this debate the first time, somebody said, can't you do both? Can't you communicate your feelings and cry as part of the process? Mm-hmm. And I said, yeah, absolutely. I mean, if that's what you're doing, then I have no problem with you crying whilst you're getting things done, right? But more often than not, no, you can cry if you can manage to multitask, but don't sit and cry, right? That's my problem, right? Don't.
So when you say
don't sit and cry, go find the other dress, communicate or make a plan, right? Like, that's the problem I have with it. And then on top of that is, I find more often than not, when you are articulating the things that are the stimuli around you that are causing you such stress to cry, more often than not, and I could be wrong, right? Obviously, people are going to come up with examples in which this isn't true, but more often than not, you find that the need or the expression of crying doesn't necessarily need to express itself as much whilst you're sort of contending with your actual emotions. So I'll give you an example. You know, when a child has hurt themselves and then they come up to you and they go, and they're doing that hyperventilating thing that children do, telling you how
the precursor to the cry.
Have you ever noticed that when you start to ask that 4-year-old child what happened and you start to force him to use his words to articulate, he cries less?
Yeah.
I wonder why that is. And I think that's how people operate too.
Right.
So
generally,
go just a quick question. So would you say that then that you have an issue and just crying is a mismanagement of your emotions towards this problem, or that is your response?
I think.
Yeah, generally, yeah. Sorry.
Right. So I totally get the point that you're making, Huey. I see your perspective. Given the place where we stand today, given the place where we stand now, given the work that society has done on our men, I want to ask 2 questions or make 2 points. One is that it can be valuable as a coping mechanism, given where we're at now, given the damage that we've already done to our men and boys. It's almost like you go to the doctor's office and it's one of the symptoms that there's something to be dealt with, right? So I think there's value in saying, because I think if we come out of the gate based on where we're at now and say men shouldn't cry, then we do a real disservice to already damaged men, to already traumatized men that need some help to deal with what they're facing. The second point that I want to make, and of course I'd invite you guys to comment, the second point I want to make, and it's kind of put in a different perspective on the conversation, we have been discussing crying as an expression of stress or trauma, but those are not the only situations in which men cry. Men cry because of feeling different emotions. My dad cried at my wedding, and I mean, that was real special for me, you know. I mean, he was simultaneously given expression with language, with understandable language, you know, but it's not only an expression of trauma. And I think if we pigeonhole it into that, then that becomes dangerous, because a man who wants to cry to express joyous emotion or loving emotion then feels like, okay, wait, I've been told that I shouldn't cry, you know. So I think we need to look at that as well.
It makes me, what she just said reminds me of our conversation on Clubhouse. Huey was actually headstrong on the fact that a man should only be allowed to cry 8 times in his life.
Oh no, it's 12. It's 12. I've wasted 4 so far.
You
so
only
I
cried 12.
Left.
Only cried 4 times, Huey. Wow.
For other people to
as
see.
An adult.
For other
people to see. All right.
We have one more video that I want to run. This should be the interesting part. All right. I want to hear you guys what you have to say after this clip runs. Right. Sure. Let's go.
This last customer is out shopping with his family.
I don't think you're understanding this. Like, she wanted this dress right here, like in a small.
But then he overhears Austin's plight.
I'm sorry, man, but I'm really upset.
Just super upset. I've had a lot going on. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I'm married, actually.
At first, Anthony Curtis tries to lighten the mood.
I'm sorry. Like, I know guys aren't supposed to be crying, but...
Yeah, we're not. What are you doing?
Just having like one of those days.
No, it's all right, man. We've all been through that.
It is so embarrassing to be crying.
But then he makes Austin an offer he cannot refuse.
I feel like I need to give you a hug.
I would appreciate that.
Really?
Holy cow. Before parting ways, this father gives Austin some final words of encouragement.
So I'm assuming that dress that you're looking for means a lot?
Yeah, I had a special night planned for my girlfriend.
I'm pretty sure she'll understand. Yeah, don't be so hard on yourself. It's the thought that counts.
Time to introduce ourselves.
How you doing, buddy? Be kidding me.
Right. So very, very interesting.
He got a hug.
That video almost made me want to cry.
Almost.
Don't waste one. Don't waste one.
Yeah. So that clip itself really speaks to my perspective on being emotionally vulnerable, crying amongst your peers, right? And of course, men who you trust or who has your best interests at heart, because being vulnerable, even amongst the wrong person, whether male or female, could put you in a place where you're vulnerable for attack. You understand? Your power being usurped, these type of things, But what do you think about this last clip?
I love that. I love that clip. I think it really spoke to the need for community and the need for empathy. I think it's important that it was a man that was able to identify with the crying male actor. And I want to go back to the point that I was making about crying being a valid part of the process for dealing with your emotions. It literally, him sitting there and crying, said to this other gentleman, something is wrong. And like I said, I guess it was, and he confirmed it was beyond just not being able to find the dress, but it was a call. That was almost the straw that broke the camel's back. We don't know what would have happened if he had gone home without having an outlet for those emotions. But the fact that he sat there and was vulnerable and cried, someone was able to come in and see the physical expression, the outward expression of the emotional turmoil or the little emotional stress that he was dealing with, and help him to manage those things. So I still have to say that this clip, as much as I loved it because I think it made the point of saying that crying is a valid part of the process of dealing with your emotions, and that it should be safe for men to do that, publicly and privately.
I still don't know about the publicly part, Jed. But Huey, what do you think about that last clip?
Well, like I said, I mean, that clip made me almost want to cry. But I watched and noted other things that were particularly interesting to me. The man who first came to comfort him, first attempted to distract him in some way and basically, point out that it's not that big a deal and tried to minimalize it. Right, but you could tell that in his attempt to do so, he was genuinely, legitimately uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Despite
you're right.
And that again, it goes back to my bigger point that society, and we haven't gotten into the reasons why yet, but society is constructed in such a way that men breaking down emotionally is deeply problematic for us all. Even the gentleman who ended up giving him a hug. I suspect that were it a woman, he would have handled it empathetically, but the deep concern wouldn't have been as much, because maybe to some degree we kind of are okay with and expect women to move on quickly from that. I think as a man, he intuitively understood that whatever brought him to that breaking point must have been something really serious, because men generally aren't supposed to be that close to breaking points anyway, right? So that's one thing interesting that I found, that I noted from that video. But I also want to quickly speak to the point about even tears of joy. That was an argument that was brought up in the room where I initially made the argument that men shouldn't cry about tears of joy, and I maintain frame. Right? To explain why I have an issue with crying, it's because I have an issue with a lack of regulating our impulses in general, right? Irrespective of whatever that impulse is. I think...
And that goes for men, Huey, let me just clarify, or is that across the board for humankind?
Across the board. Yeah. Across the board. I'll be totally frank that this was, I've been in several relationships. I've been in a relationship for coming up to 5 years now. One of the things that's tricky is trying to communicate when conflict arises without our emotions. Like if you speak to any marriage counselor or therapist, they'll tell you, or pre-marriage counselor or therapist or couples therapist, they'll tell you that you have to find a way to communicate outside of the emotions or outside of charged language, outside of the hyper-emotionalized state. And I think, again, that speaks to the fact that when we're hyper-emotional, we're not necessarily processing at our best. We're not at our most efficient as human beings. Our emotions, when they take over us, can be very problematic. It should be us learning and listening to our emotions and making decisions consciously from that point. And that's my problem with crying. It's an impulse. It's a reflex. And it's like, I feel like, generally speaking, you should do your best. No judgment if you're not perfect, but you should do your best to keep as many of your impulses and reflexes under control, particularly as a man. I say particularly as a man because I can only relate to being a man. I would say the same thing to women, but I'm not going to argue with a woman about what a woman's experience is like, because I don't know what it's like to have that set of hormones in you and what that's going to mean ultimately, right? Maybe that set of hormones demands specific responses.
Right.
Yeah. I just want to stick a pin real quick in our conversation. We have just a quick ad to run. Shout out to one of our sponsors, Sui Generis Drumming Academy, right? We have that queued up there, director. Yeah.
What happened, son?
Daddy, I'm not getting this thing.
Let me see what I can do.
Sui Generis Sound Drumming Academy, how may I help you?
Sui Generis, we offer drumming lessons for all ages. We also explore various genres of music, drum theory, drum soloing, drum kit tuning, and much more.
A few moments later.
Yes, I got it!
Sui Generis, helping you fuel your God-given talent.
All right, so we gotta say shout outs to our first sponsor, Sui Generis Music and Drumming Academy. Kiwana Mahaber doing a lot of good work out there with the youths of tomorrow. All right. So yeah, back into the discussion. Go ahead.
I must comment on a point that Huey just made, and I didn't want to lose my rebuttal almost. Huey. He said that crying is an impulse, and I don't necessarily disagree. It's not the only impulse that we have, and I want to posit that there's a reason that we have these impulses, and to say we should try our best to subdue them and to not have them rear their heads at all. I think that's a fight against nature. No, I'm not saying that we shouldn't manage our emotions. I'm not saying that at all. You made a very good point about being able to communicate and being able to relate with each other without being highly charged emotionally. But I think there is still a place for us to explore those emotions. Why am I feeling this way? Before you come into the conversation. So I think making a blanket statement about not crying, the dangers of being highly emotional, and I use that term carefully, that is something that we might want to look a little closer at. Yeah?
So you're saying that we ought to be a degree of emotional.
I think
in terms
so.
of response?
There's a reason nature created us that way. There's a reason that we have these impulses. So I think it's a mismanagement. It's a admission that I don't know how to deal with my emotions. If I say I shouldn't cry, You know, there's a reason we have those impulses in us. So I think it's a mismanagement of your emotions. It's an admission that I'm not able to deal with these emotions. That's why I'm pushing them to the side, or, you know. So I think you might want to reconsider that. You said you're holding your frame.
Well, let me explain why. So a couple of interesting things you said just now was that it's like we're fighting against our nature. Now that presupposes that our nature as human beings is inherently good, and we are incredibly complex creatures. We're capable of incredibly great, beautiful things, but we're also it's within our nature to sometimes do incredibly evil things.
It is.
Right? And so we're supposed to repress our nature in a lot of important ways, right? I don't know if I can give this as an example, but it's the only clear example that can come to my head right now. I'll try and think of a list. Here's a better example. It's in men's nature to want to challenge authority, right? And to push boundaries, right? And explore those boundaries, even with relationships. And sometimes that's going to require something physical. We need to sometimes quell those impulses, right? Fight our natures, because if we didn't, it's all out chaos.
In a man's nature as in male man, or man as in humankind? I always have to clarify.
Oh, sure. I mean, both, but I'm always trying to make sure that I'm not like speaking on women's behalf. So I'll say it generally, but you know, the problem is if I say something that applies to women and then someone speaks as a woman and says I'm wrong, then it's like, okay, well, I guess, I don't want to quibble over identity politics. But generally, it's in man's nature. It's in man's nature to do a lot of things, right? It's in our nature to survive and replicate, right? For example. These are two core drives, biological drives we're born with. There's so many things that derive, so many impulses, reflexes, skills and abilities that derive from just these two impulses alone. It's in our nature to procreate and have sex, but we kind of have to restrict that nature and draw boundaries on what kinds of sex are acceptable. For example, a 50-year-old man and a 12-year-old girl, society, we all agree there's something wrong there, even though it's in our nature to have sex. We have to repress our natures to be more sophisticated creatures. Now, if we go biblically, and I don't want to get too bogged down in the biblical, just to respect everybody's beliefs, but I want to use this as an analogy as opposed to, a prescription. The Bible points out that since the fall of man, we are born sinners. That's now part of our nature. That's now part of our story. So even when you're born, you're capable of incredible evil. So when we say repressed nature, there are certain parts of our natures that do need to be repressed.
Agreed.
So then the question becomes, which are those?
And I think that's the question.
Yes, that's the real question, right? So is crying one of those things? I don't know. But what I've known is, as a Stoic, so I'm a practicing, I would like to consider myself a practicing Stoic. There's a common misunderstanding or misconception of what happens when you practice Stoicism. People think that you don't feel emotions or deal with the emotions. That's far from the case. You can't stop yourself from feeling emotions. It's physically impossible. And if you could, that's borderline, sociopathy at that point. There's a mental, neurological problem at that point. You're always going to feel your emotions. The difference, though, is as a Stoic, you're always aware that you choose how to respond to it. So, in other words, you're never going to do something out of anger, right? You choose whether you're going to do something out of, do something or not. Your anger isn't going to be the thing that dictates what you do, right? You will feel angry, right? But it's your choice to punch or not.
Yeah.
There's that direct one-to-one connection between your emotional state and action is mitigated, not mitigated, is managed by your mind. And that's what the purpose of Stoicism really is. And that's what I'm saying about crying. Crying seems to me it's like if somebody pinched you and your arm flinched, right? Makes sense for it to flinch, but I'm proposing that we get to a point of maturity where if somebody pinches you, you can look, observe, assess, make a determination as to whether to move away or not. Do all of that in real time before just instantly flinching. Because what's going to happen is if you're holding the baby, someone pinches you, you flinch, what's going to happen? You're going to drop the baby. You know what I mean? So, it's a stupid example.
Get it.
I don't know if that made sense. I know that's a very foolish example.
No, but we see where you're coming from. We see where you're coming from. Yeah.
I wanna
I'll give you. Can I give a better example? My girlfriend is terrified of insects, right? So much so that it's to the point where it's reflexes. It's within her nature naturally to be scared and weary about insects, right?